Okay, so today I want to make a video about this quote, and it's a guy that quotes Thomas Sowell on Twitter, and it says, "To this very moment, slavery continues in parts of Africa and the Islamic world. Very little noise is made about those who denounce slavery of the past in the West, because there is no money to be made denouncing it and no political advantages to be gained." And that's something in society that's a really big issue nowadays, and it's basically just people virtue signaling. And it happens on both sides, but it happens a lot more on the left, and I mean a lot more. But a lot of conservative or Republican politicians are going, mainly conservative, are going to the left, so they're doing it a lot too. But that's a different story. And it really boggles my mind now that just people's level of, I guess, arrogance and narcissism is that they claim to care so much about all these issues that have long been figured out. I mean, slavery's been outlawed in the U.S. for what, 150 odd years. Um, Most people, you got to go back 8, 9 generations to find any of their descendants that own slaves. And people claim that this is the worst thing in the world, that their great 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 grandpa or grandma was a slave, and how this is this huge issue, and that somehow makes the descendants of anyone who owns slaves responsible for the slavery. But if you're a single mom and you have three, 4 kids from 3 different guys, well, you're not responsible for that. It's this backwards level of thinking that we do nowadays, that people who had stuff that their 7, 8, 9 generations ago parents did, they're somehow responsible for that. But if you make endless mistakes in the here and now, you're not responsible for that. It's this backwards level of thinking where we assign some people agency, but other people it's just pure determinism, that everything they do, they're like a robot basically. And it's so inconsistent and inconsistent in every way, shape, and form that it boggles my mind. The other aspect of this story is I hate to bring them up, but the people like Colin Kaepernick and all his supporters who they claim to care so much, and it's the Black Lives Matter, who aren't quite as big anymore, but they still are somewhat big, in that they claim, oh, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, but what about all the Black lives in Africa and the Islamic world that are currently slaves? I mean, currently, not 150 or 200 years ago, currently. And when you bring it up to those kind of people, it falls on deaf ears. And like this quote says, is that they don't care about people's rights and all that kind of racism and all that stuff. They only care because they can either make money off of it or they can make personal gain off of it. And it's so disgusting to me that people don't fall for that. But people do fall for that. It's that, like, they're only doing it because they want to either profit or get personal gain from it. Like, these people, you got millions of followers on Twitter or wherever, and they just virtue signal all day. Like, it's pretty insane. So the thing about slavery, the other thing too, is that slavery exists in Africa in a large part due to the Clinton and more or less the Obama administration that Clinton headed up. They took out Gaddafi in Libya, and that's one of the biggest slave trade areas in Africa, and it only exists because Gaddafi was taken out by Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration, and no one holds them responsible. So it's very very discerning or concerning to me that nobody seems to care about this kind of stuff. And like I said, and like the quote said, the only reason people lecture, whites, let's be honest, about slavery is that whites bend over backwards. They'll go along with any demeaning or anything that people put on them, and they'll beat them down, and they'll do whatever they want to do. And the reason why no one talks about it when it's Africans doing it, or is people from the Middle East doing it, is that if you try and lecture them about the immoralities of slavery and how it still goes on today, they won't care. They'll just be like, yeah, F you, I don't care. And that's the attitude whites need. And they're going to keep being lectured. They're going to keep, pretending this idea of, reparations being paid, which is insane. Because if that's true, then the Islamic world should be paying reparations too, because they've had slavery for a lot longer on a lot larger scale than whites ever did, and then no one's bringing that up. And like I said, that's because, well, they'll just tell you to F off. We're not doing that. But whites, it's this bend over backwards, pathological self-doubt that we tend to have in the West, and it's to the point to where it's possibly going to undermine our success as a civilization. Is that if we keep having this pathological self-doubt about our own past and future and present, someone who doesn't have that, namely people from the Middle East and Africa, are going to come along and they're going to take over. And not that that's a bad thing if they're coming for the right reasons, but they're not coming for the right reasons, at least a lot of them. Some of them obviously are, don't get me wrong, but that's kind of what's happening nowadays, is that, immoralities that happened a long time ago are a big issue, but the same thing that happened now isn't. Like, it's just such backwards thinking that I can't even put it into words. But like I said, the problem is that most people care more about the political and personal gain aspect of talking and, caring about these kind of things than they actually do about the actual issues. And that's why whenever I hear someone, at least the way I should rephrase it is that whenever you hear someone claim to care so much about slavery and racism nowadays, I automatically put them off as, like, I just tune them out, to be honest. Like, I mean, you still listen, but you're going to tune them out, in that that they're just virtue signaling. Anybody claiming to do that on average now they're just virtue signaling probably 95% of the time. And that's sad too, because there's people that experience racism nowadays. There's people that experience that kind of stuff, and the fact that the overwhelming majority of people who claim to care don't actually care, it's hurting the actual victims. It's not helping it's only helping the pretend victims, or the victims of the past, that there's no way we can change it, right? So that's the sad part about it, is that a lot of people have learned to tune it out. And I seen in a recent poll of when Trump tweeted out his, they should go back to their countries and fix it tweet, that they polled Trump supporters on if they I don't know exactly what the wording was, but if they changed their mind or if they were concerned about the tweet, and the overwhelming majority of them were not. So, in other words, the overwhelming majority of people, at least on the right, understand that the whole, throwing racism out all the time, it falls on deaf ears for them, and the left understand this too. I don't think they actually believe a lot of the stuff they say. There's no way they possibly can, or they're retarded, basically. And that's what the level we're at nowadays, is that if someone's accused of, if a random politician who I've never heard of is accused of being a racist, I would assume that not only are they not racist, but they're a better politician than their counterpart or counterparts, and that's the level we're at nowadays. And it's gonna blow up at some point. It's just a matter of when, but we'll see as far as all that stuff goes. But that's about it as far as this video goes. Just wanted to talk about that because I thought it was a very interesting quote. So if you liked the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.